Avowed is an Xbox 360 gen game released in 2025. The problems with the game are that it holds on too tightly to old game design mechanics that the industry has since moved on from. Many argue this is also the reason Starfield didn't live up to expectations. The difference here is that there are some ideas that Obsidian really elevated and improved on over their previous games, and even other games in the same genre. Avowed looked very different when we first saw it back in 2020, looking like a darker tone and a larger world, something that Obsidian hasn't done before and have still yet to do. Avowed's premise changed a couple times in development, with the most recent one seeing Obsidian scurry back into their shell after starting something completely foreign. The final product of Avowed are fragments of new ideas, chunks of well thought out content, and fractions of innovation that end up fitting that tried and true Obsidian mold, the mold in which all of its segments fell into place. We're going to take a deeper look at Avowed from Obsidian Entertainment, published under Xbox. Please leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. From the intro, you may believe that I didn't like Avowed or that it's a bad game. It's not, and I actually really liked it. There are aspects of it that were incredible, and others that can be incredible with a couple tweaks. It was mainly the expectations that hit me the hardest. I really expected the dialogue to be top-notch, and in turn the companions and your interactions with them. I also expected the days of gobbling down dozens of snacks and herbs from your inventory to fill up your health would be left behind. I also expected plenty of choice and consequence, not just from companions, but from doing quests and making friends and enemies that would tie into some larger narrative. This could all be my fault for expecting Obsidian to have learned from the last 15 years of making RPGs, but I was wrong. My bad. I'm being a little smug here, but the combat is one of the aspects of the game that was amazing. I think it really shocked people how Obsidian seemed to have focused on making such a heavy and layered combat system. The thing I have to mention right away is that you don't need to build into any specific category, like one-handed melee, two-handed melee, wands, or magic. You may pick up and use anything that you take an interest in. It's not like some other games where you find gear for the thief, for example, but since you didn't build thief, then it's useless to you. In the menus, each playstyle has its own skill tree, which can gain you new abilities, but also buff some of your stats. If you are leaning more toward favoring a certain weapon, either because you want to keep your range, or you want to dodge instead of block, depending on your preferred playstyle, there are perks you can get which increase both offensive and defensive stats to fit in with that playstyle. You can also just dabble from each tree as you please. As you hit certain character levels, you unlock the ability to buy more perks, and you can respec at any time in the menu using some coin. The combat does the thing that God of War 2018 did, where your melee weapon will kind of get stuck inside the enemy for a frame, and then they'll get hit in that direction, with some screen shake to really sell it. When you actually take an enemy out, the ragdoll physics can kick in and send them flying. They really made quite an improvement over the Outer Worlds combat. And even in that game, the shooting felt much better once you could play it at anything other than 30 frames. Speaking of frame rate, one thing that I noticed is that sometimes different NPCs are in different frame rates. I can't even begin to understand how this happens. In the footage I captured, Kai is running at 60, while Yotsley and Marius are at what looks like 30, and Giada is at like 10. I have no idea what causes this and if there's a fix. I'd assume it has something to do with the quality and performance modes, but I really don't know. A thing with the camps, I just got off playing Dragon's Dogma 2, and I even have over 80 hours in Baldur's Gate 3, but the camps in Avowed are just not that important. The reason I bring up those other games is because in them, camping is crucial and a big deal. Baldur's Gate, you need the correct items to be able to feed everyone in the camp before you sleep for the night, and pivotal story cutscenes only happen in the camp. And the camp can be various sizes and layouts depending on where you are in the world. Dragon's Dogma 2, I mainly use the camps out on expeditions to top up my loss gauge after doing missions back to back before returning to a town. But in both of these games, the camping mechanic is very important and use hard to get items, but are always worth it because of how critical camping is as a feature. Anyways, I say all of that because in Avowed, you can camp anywhere and at any time you see a giant green address stone. Camping instantly makes it night and you form a few tents in a big circle next to the stone. Your NPCs are standing around if you want to lore dump on them, and there are various tents in the circle, which are different tools that you have access to, mainly upgrading or enchanting equipment and accessing your storage. And that's really it. Walking out of the camp, you rest, I guess, and then it becomes daytime. You get full health and essence and continue as you were. It was very lackluster to me. This is another thing that could be seen as my fault, but in general, camping didn't seem like something that had any weight to it, literally at all. If you forgot something, you could just turn around and make another camp in the same spot, which would just instantly make it night again. It was just a sloppy way to do a camping system, even without comparing it to Baldur's Gate or Dragon's Dogma. When leaving camps, what I normally did was make sure I had a waypoint set on where I wanted to go next. You could see the waypoint in the world, so leaving the camp, I would just beeline it straight to my next objective. The thing here is that there are tons of optional areas in the game. You may be given directions to them after accepting a side quest, or you may just find them on your own. What I did, especially early on in the game, was just walk along the edges of the map, looking for anything that looked like steps or a cave to go and explore. When you are looking for better gear, this is one of the best things to do in my opinion. I'd also accept a bunch of quests and bounties and then explore the map, and do any of the missions that are nearby or on the way to the next main objective. The thing that was a little puzzling to me is how the game communicates to you if you're under-leveled for a mission. It will have skulls next to it, from 1 to 3 from what I know. I think the amount of skulls is based on the level and defensive property of your armor specifically, rather than your weapons. There were times when I leveled up enough where a skull would go away, then I would do the quest and the enemies have the skull next to their name anyways. So the game expected you to be under-leveled, but not under-leveled enough for them to wipe the floor with you, I guess. I feel like a numbering system would have worked better. Like if you're level 10 and the mission required level 12, then it could be red. But once you get to 11, it could turn yellow, meaning you could do it, but you're at a disadvantage. I don't know, it was very unclear to me my entire playthrough. While we're still talking about exploring, I was also kind of let down by how the game doesn't let you climb around some of the ledges and the fungi that riddle the world. I really expected these things to be climbable and traversable. Every time I tried to climb up to reach a higher area, it would just glitch me off or just have a barrier altogether. Something I have to mention is one of the biggest points of contention with the game was how empty the hubs are. Entering some of these towns, they are so vast and they look great. Amazing looking architecture, very inviting to explore, but there's no one around. You meet the odd person, but the scale and investment that these towns look like they have, it just doesn't have the population that you'd expect. Also, no one is walking around. The couple people that do walk like 10 feet in one direction and then back again. The NPCs that you talk to don't move at all. There's a commander outside of the first main city you go to, and is one of the first people you talk to when you finish the tutorial. But 40 hours later, they were still standing in the same spot. This kind of goes without saying, but Avowed is not really the type of game to get immersed in. Typically, games with a silent protagonist are aiming for some level of immersion, but with all the pitfalls that Avowed has, I was never completely and mentally invested in any of it. There's also no reputation system, literally nothing in terms of consequence for stealing. You can come across a camp of soldiers eating their dinner around a campfire, steal the food off the spit, take the food out of their plate, take their weapons that they put off to the side, steal the books in their tent, and nothing. They won't attack you. They won't even say anything in the slightest. The only time where I took something and there was a consequence, it was tied to an encounter in the world, and it was set up in a way that I knew there would be a clapback for stealing. This is also something that could be spun into a positive, being that the game doesn't take itself too serious. You can jump around and leap around, climbing all over the place and stealing their shit. But the most important thing is that Obsidian wants you to focus on having fun. A reputation system in some games can be severely busted. I just feel like the game is babysitting you, preventing you from having a good time. Alright, let's talk about something more positive now. It's also worth mentioning that the world looks great. The graphics are more than passable for a 2025 game. Obviously, it's not photoreal, but we are living in a time where these games push insane graphics, but end up looking muddy, streaky, and run like garbage. And on console, you have to play the game in like 480i to get a solid 60. I feel like Avowed is in that unique position where it looks good enough to be timeless, but also runs at a solid resolution and a high frame rate on modern consoles. The game's world is also super colorful. It is a far cry from what their Skyrim version of the game would have been like, but also looks super inviting to play whenever I see it. I also have to say that while I praise the graphical fidelity and the colorful world, I think the character designs are pretty bad. They are too simplistic, like high-res cartoon characters with exaggerated features that don't fit the world in my opinion. Actually, it's kind of funny now that I'm saying it. It reminds me of my critique of Signalis. I think that game was gorgeous in almost every aspect, except for its over-the-top anime-looking characters. Okay, this is a good time to talk about the companions. Where do I start? I think Obsidian really fumbled here. I'm the type of person that doesn't typically care for companions in games, honestly, but they dropped the ball so hard that it was impossible to ignore. Everyone just felt extremely flat. Kai was the most interesting one, but then again, he's just okay. He's also the one that the game immediately gives you after you leave the tutorial island. Kai says that he'll stick with you until you come across the Claviger, and this is another missed opportunity to me. Him wanting to be with you for his own personal reason is actually pretty clever. This is also the perfect time for Obsidian to do something risky. This little stint where you have yet to meet the Claviger could be Kai's trial run. see if you like him and his abilities, his dialogue, the bits of his character that the game feeds you, and if you want him around for the rest of the game. Then once he meets his goal, you can convince him to stay or not, and it's up to you. Before you say it, I know they couldn't have done this in the game simply because there aren't many companions to choose from to begin with. There's only 4, which is another big miss. Outer Worlds had more, and some of them were totally missable. I beat that game and didn't find 2 of the companions. It made me wonder what kind of content I missed out on and how deep it probably could have gone. But Avowed, you can't miss any of the 4 companions, and even if you try to piss them off and send them away, they're always there. It really gives you that false sense of choice which plagued the entire game for me. A bunch of small meaningless choices which utterly ended in the same position. A positive experience I noticed was that I was on a mission with Marius and Kai, and they began bickering back and forth on a mission that they previously did together. You get insights on what they would do in certain scenarios, and what their views may be like on events you have yet to face later in the story. They went back and forth for a lot longer than I expected, and it honestly felt pretty natural, especially when they're explaining their side of the story. They almost feel like they're trying to convince you that they made the right choice back then. Having a history with each other is cool and can make for some pretty dope sections. It was a really cool moment, but stuff like this is few and far between. It doesn't have to be that they need to know each other prior. It could just be them discussing a big event that happened in the world, and how they agree or disagree on how the local government handled things, or something along those lines. There are plenty of ways to flesh out characters, and Obsidian missed the mark in more ways than one. Also, I have to mention the romance. This entire topic was funny to read online. Some people saying to stop being horny, you don't need to fuck everything in every game, but on the other side, very similar games typically have a romance option. Kerry Patel, the director of the game, basically said that players tend to use the romance in games to their own benefit, in terms of invisible stats and leveling, and that romance is the cover to the player min-maxing those systems, and that being the reason they chose not to do it. I'm paraphrasing, but I don't think this is true in the slightest. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think Obsidian is capable of making a solid romancing sub-story with the characters. I just talked about how they didn't do a great job fleshing out the characters and how they are forced upon you whether you like them or not. And you think they can do a romance option well? One thing contradicts the other, in my opinion. Obsidian did the bare minimum with the companions to begin with, and adding romance requires deeper systems and relationships with your companions that is just not present in the game. And if a player wants to use those features to their advantage, as long as it doesn't break the game wide open, then what's the harm? The player gets more unique dialogue options, maybe a tailored quest with bonus XP, and a deeper look at the character's backstory and personal motivations in a relation to the main quest. This has Shadowheart written all over it. The way Larian wove her romance into the personal quest of self-discovery was masterful. It's not always about some underlying, somewhat exploitative mechanic, but about how players now view everything differently because they now have a deeper connection with the world after getting invested in a character's virtual life. How did you view the world of Cyberpunk after doing Panam's missions and getting to know her better? How about Liara from Mass Effect? Or Triss from The Witcher? I did make a point that a romance option in this game would very likely not work, but there's also a chance where it would patch a lot of the holes in the aspects that people don't like about these characters. It also isn't great that there are only 4 companions to choose from anyways, and in that case you can actually spin it into a positive. Knowing that no matter how you play, what your choices are, and your relationship with your companions, you know that every playthrough will have a Kai, Marius, Yoghtsli, and Giada. This actually has a decent payoff in the endgame. Obsidian can create content that includes all of these characters because they know that everyone has all of them in their party. You get to hear them give their opinions and perspective on the world events at hand and how they may align or not with how you will proceed. The content in the game can be tailored, knowing that the companions are constants and not variables. Speaking of which, the story is another thing that I've seen on both sides. They did a great job starting it off with a simple premise. You are an envoy sent by the Adirian Empire to the Living Lands to investigate a plague that is killing and turning locals and their wildlife basically into zombies. The story is rooted in the Pillars of Eternity universe and has some crossover, but I only dabbled into Pillars and don't really know anything about the world on that side of things, so I won't speak on it much. The thing that this game does, which I first saw in Pentiment, is give you a glossary. You can view the conversation history as it's happening, and any notable words or slang that is key to understanding the context, you get a description on what it is. Early in the game, they take it pretty easy on you, teaching you certain terms that are relevant to the immediate story, but as you get later and later into the game, it really starts to pile things on, where the glossary list becomes full, and you're needing to read pages of descriptions to understand anything that these characters are talking about. There came a time near the end of the game where I basically gave up. It became overwhelming at a point, and I was just trying to understand the basic talking points in each conversation. This is another time to mention some of the NPCs in the game just ramble and ramble. This happening during important moments is totally understandable, but it happened a lot during side quests and even just talking to some of your companions. It just seems like you guys start talking in circles and the chat doesn't lead anywhere at all. Another point where Obsidian really missed the mark. As we wind down the conversation, I also want to bring up the constant comparisons that the game has been getting to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. They are both medieval first-person RPGs with Avowed leaning more fantasy than KCD is. But that's not what I was personally comparing it to. I opted for Avowed instead of KCD 2, simply because I'm playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 at the same time. They are very different in many ways, but Avowed isn't trying to do anything new for Obsidian's style of RPG. It does have a great combat system, beautiful world with plenty of content packed in, but the rest of the world is shallow and very similar to games that they've already made before, using some new ideas but ultimately slotting them into a mold that they've created years ago. I beat Avowed in just over 48 hours of playtime, and by the end I was happy to be done with it. I just wanted to be finished, and I seen all I wanted to see. But as of this recording, I have over 120 hours in KCD1, probably the most hours I've ever put into a single player game, and I'm still having a blast. Mind you that KCD is 6 years old and it came out in 2018 and is doing things that are rarely seen in games at all. When I'm done with it, there's a sequel that just released, and there are dozens of more hours for me to get lost in. Avowed is the perfect 7 out of 10. The reason I say that is because it could go either way. You may play it and find most of what I said to be completely wrong, and you think it's a 9. Or you jump in and play it and you hate it, and you think it deserves a 5 or a 6. For what Obsidian is used to creating, a very by-the-book, fairly linear Western RPG, with basic companions, basic side quests, an inviting and beautiful world to explore, with no consequences or deep choices, Obsidian made their old reliable with a new coat of paint. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well, I would really appreciate it. Leave a comment for the algorithm too, it really helps me get discovered. What did you think of Avowed? Are you going to pick it up or pass on it? Anyways, I'll see you all in the next one. Stay safe.